gentlemen, welcome to Ariel Helwani's MMA Show!
Back in your life on this Monday, October 8th, 2018. Hi again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. Welcome back to the show. Happy Thanksgiving if you're in Canada. Hope you're enjoying the day with some turkey. And your old pal, your fellow Canadian, Ariel Helwani. It is so great to have you here on this Monday afternoon. And my friends, do we have a lot to talk about on this Monday afternoon? My, oh my. Holy moly. What a weekend in Las Vegas. By now, you probably know. Khabib Nurmagomedov is still the UFC lightweight champion. By now, you probably know that he submitted Conor McGregor in the fourth round via rear naked choke. Today on the program, we're talking all things UFC 229. We're, of course, also looking ahead to this weekend in the tri-state area. It's a very big one, and we don't say that often as far as MMA is concerned. Bellator on Friday in Connecticut. Bellator on Saturday night on Long Island. But, of course, what is on everyone's mind is Saturday night in Las Vegas, UFC 229, one of the most anticipated events in the history of this great sport. And I have some thoughts right off the top about what transpired Saturday night in Las Vegas. Leading up to Saturday night, I had a great time. The atmosphere was great. It had a big fight field. 10,615 people showed up to the ceremonial weigh-ins. They already knew, for the most part, they probably already knew that both Khabib and Conor had already weighed in successfully and that the fight was on. But they just wanted to see them square off. That's how big of a deal this was. That's the most for any non-Brazilian weigh-in. I say non-Brazilian because UFC 198 had around 15,000 people. But that exceeds any turnout for any weigh-in, ceremonial or the old way, when they were just weighing in one time in the afternoon. That's insane. That's incredible, and that gives you a taste of how big this was in Las Vegas. A lot of Irish fans there, a lot of Khabib fans there. It was a great build. We had the media workouts on Wednesday. We had the press conference, and that weirdness on Thursday. Khabib showing up, leaving, Dana killing time, Conor showing up. Memorable, unique, somewhat of a letdown, but still much talked about. Friday, of course, the weigh-in, and then Saturday. Saturday turned out great up until the main event. And I'll get to the main event. Not saying the main event was bad, but up until the main event, what a show. No real stinkers, some big-time performances. Of course, Derek Lewis is now a social media star. Everyone loves Derek Lewis. I reported earlier today, he gained over the weekend over 500,000 Instagram followers. That's nuts. Knocked out Alexander Volkov with just a couple of minutes left in their fight. Tremendous. Big win for Dominic Reyes. Tony Ferguson comes back. Fun fight, exciting fight, entertaining fight. Top to bottom, it was a fun card. And then we get to the main event. And the walkouts were great. They gave it a little extra spice. Put a little mustard on the hot dog. Awesome. And then the fight starts. And even like the minute before the fight started, I was thinking to myself, I can't believe this is actually happening. I can't believe they're actually in the cage. John Malkovich promo's playing. The place is on fire. The atmosphere is incredible. It's second to none. Everyone's standing up. Conor pulls out the Billy strut. I mean, it's all firing on all cylinders. It's great. And the fight starts off. And we know exactly what Khabib wants to do. And he's effective. And he's doing well. And he gets him to the ground. And he's frustrating Conor after a few seconds on the feet. And he easily wins round one. But it wasn't a 10-8. There wasn't enough damage, in my opinion. So it was a 10-9 first round for Khabib Nurmagomedov. Initially, as he was walking out, I turned to Chael Sonnen and I said, I think he might look a little bit nervous. I couldn't have been more wrong. He was not nervous. He rose to the occasion and then some. He was not off his game as a result of anything that Conor McGregor said or did leading up to this fight. Not at all. Not one bit. Second round was more the same and then some. That was a 10-8 round. 100%. Dominant. Tons of damage. One-sided. That was a 10-8 round for Khabib Nurmagomedov. Things couldn't be going better. In fact, Conor became so concerned about the takedown as he should have been, Khabib even rocked him and quickly dropped him. which reminded me of my theory, by the way, that Khabib was playing possum in Brooklyn, that he's a much better striker than we think he is, who possesses a lot more power than we think he does. Now, I'm not saying he's, a Golden Gloves boxer, but don't sleep on his striking. And we saw that in the second round. By the third round, it seemed like both men were getting really tired. It's tiring to try to get off the ground while you have Khabib Nurmagomedov on top of you, and it's tiring to keep someone on the ground as strong as Conor. Third round, I have heard some people say Khabib took the round off. I don't agree, but I do think that Conor won that round, 10-9. The judges agreed. It was close, but I thought he did just enough. That is notable because that's the first time in Khabib's UFC career that he has ever lost a round. Now, I've heard some people say first time in his career, period, that he's lost a round, but to be honest, do we have the scorecards from some of those early fights back in Russia? I don't think we do. So I'm comfortable saying first time in his career that he's lost a round, and that is notable. That's a nice little feather in Conor's cap. So now we're wondering, going into the fourth, is the tide turning, or is Khabib going to come back strong? Well, he came back strong. Stronger than ever. He finished the fight in the fourth. He submitted Conor in the fourth. And it was ruled a rear naked. Felt a little like a rear naked. Well, I didn't actually feel it, but it looked like a rear naked / neck crank. In the end, though, Conor taps in the fourth. And so the fight plays out how a lot of people thought it would play out. Dominant wrestling. Cardio comes into play. Conor had some moments. Stuffed 4 takedowns. Chael was actually super impressed with his takedown defense. So we're kind of talking throughout the entire fight. Was impressed with his ability to get up. But Khabib is just so good. And the way he wraps your legs on the ground once he has you is phenomenal stuff. Chael, again, was telling me that he tries to do that in practice all the time, and he can't do it. And he's been doing this for, 30 years, wrestling, that is. So he taps him in the fourth. And then moments after, and now at this juncture, we're high atop T-Mobile, and we're watching it all. And I see Khabib start to almost yell at Conor very briefly, but he does have a thing or two to say, and maybe he holds on to that choke a smidge long, but there's no foul there. This is not Husimar Palhares, right? Then he turns around, and then he starts to get really animated towards Conor's corner, throws his mouthpiece at them. And I've looked at this footage a million times. We all have. It's like the Zapruder film at this point. And it seems like Dylan Dennis, who is the target of his yelling, is almost not even looking at him at this juncture, but something happens, something clicks, something snaps, and Khabib jumps over the cage. And he jumps towards Dennis, and by now you know about the brawl, the melee, security getting involved, and now everyone's paying attention to what's happening there outside the cage. And I'm thinking at this moment, this is shades of Riddick Bowe versus Andrew Galata, when there was a massive brawl and people were sent to the hospital and chairs were thrown, and it was one of the ugliest scenes in the history of boxing. And that's what I was afraid of in that moment. This is going to be horrendous. This is going to be a tragedy. This is going to get really serious. And in hindsight, I think two things need to be said about why it did not get so serious. A, I think the UFC was prepared. I think the UFC made a conscious effort to keep as many members of Conor and Khabib's team in the back. A lot of people weren't allowed to come back, including Conor's security team. Ali Abdelaziz was in the back. A lot of people were left in the back because they didn't want many members of the team there so that something like this wouldn't happen. So they need to be given credit for perhaps foreseeing that something could happen. Emotions are high, and I think it could have been worse had they not done that. Now, you could make a case Conor's security team should have been there maybe to protect him, but they only allowed X amount of people. Okay, fine. I also think the fact that it was a very pro-Conor crowd stopped this from spilling into the crowd and becoming a, Conor fan base versus a Khabib fan base brawl like it was when Riddick Bowe and Andrew Galata fought. If you have not seen that, you should go and check it out on YouTube. It's one of the ugliest scenes. Just to give you a sense at how bad this could have been. Everyone there is kind of pro-Conor. For the most part, no one was really fighting. There were some scenes I saw, outside in the concourse. It definitely got ugly. It wasn't 100% pro-Conor, but it could have been worse if it was 60-40, 50-50, right? Well, while everyone is paying attention to that, Conor is left essentially unattended in the cage. And that's when members of Khabib's team go in there, and that's when he gets lit up, and that's when punches are thrown, and that's when it really gets ugly. And yeah, this has been compared, and I made the comparison to the Strikeforce brawl back in 2010 in Nashville, Jake Shields versus Dan Henderson. The big difference between this event and that event was that that one was contained in the cage. Fans weren't involved, right, or weren't in danger. Well, unfortunately, in this event, it spilled out and fans were in danger. But luckily, as of right now, no serious injuries have been reported. And so this whole thing plays out, and Dana White is there, and Daniel Cormier is there trying to calm down Khabib, and Luke Rockhold is there trying to calm down Khabib. Eventually, Conor is escorted out by security, and eventually Khabib is escorted out. And Khabib is robbed of the moment that he has been waiting for, where they announce and still and put the belt around his waist and call him champion after beating his rival. He's robbed of that moment because Dana White says the fans are going to explode if they give him the belt, and he walks out, just leave. He fought for it. Cormier and Rockhold said, just leave, you won, it's all good. And then it ends with essentially Bruce Buffer in this surreal scene announcing the winner by himself in the cage and then walking off, and essentially the show is over. And so a few things to note. First of all, I thought the UFC did a poor job of showing what was happening. I understand that they're the ones producing this. I understand that this is a pay-per-view event and they're the head of production. But if you compare it to Bogalada, you compare it to the Palace incident, the malice at the Palace between the Pistons and Pacers back in the day, you compare it to the Strikeforce event, they did their very best to not show what was happening. They were pulling out. And for that, we know that it's because they're producing it. They don't want you to see what's behind the curtain. But in this case, you could not escape that. You cannot escape that. And I thought it was a little dishonest. Now, I've talked about this in the past. Aljamain Sterling gets knocked out. He gets sent to the hospital. Nothing is mentioned. And they've done a better job. They deserve some credit for listening and doing a better job. But in this case, it was very clear that they were making a very conscious effort to not show that and pulling out. And I felt it was dishonest. This is happening. Anik and the team did a good job, I think, of trying to tell you as much as possible. But it's very clear they did not want as much as possible to be shown. And now I see a lot of people all day. I'm getting hit up all day. Did you see Conor threw the first punch? Did you see this? Did you see that? Did you see this? Did you see that? Everyone wants to cast blame. Everyone wants to cast blame. Let me just say very, very clearly, everyone is to blame. You cannot look at this as a singular moment, as a singular incident. This is April to October. Everyone is to blame for April to October, and you could even start before April when the talk started. Every single person is to blame. The UFC is to blame for promoting it as such. Conor is to blame for the bus incident and the rhetoric and the talk about religion and parents and Dagestan. Khabib is to blame for jumping out of the cage and doing what he did. Khabib's team is to blame for lighting up a guy that was just in a fight. Conor's team is to blame for the things that they've said about Khabib and his team. Everyone is to blame. Everyone helped make this a combustible situation. So enough of this guy threw the first punch. First of all, it is an unspoken rule in sports. If I'm standing at third base and I play for the New York Mets and someone runs onto the field, you are allowed to defend yourself. You are allowed to attack. If we really want to get into the nitty-gritty, Khabib jumping over and then Khabib's team jumping in, what did you want Conor to do? The guy was just in a fight, was just tapped out. He's probably out of it. He sees people coming after him. You want him to stand there? He threw the first punch. Khabib was already over. He was already over, fighting with his own team. But again, I want to be very clear here. Everyone is to blame. Stop trying to blame one singular person. Everyone is to blame for this buildup. And if you think for a second that they are not going to use this footage whenever they do meet again, and they will meet again, you are fooling yourselves. Please look at the past 6 months. You're fooling yourself. Dana has to play the disappointed dad role. He has to do that. What else is he going to say? This was the second biggest gate in UFC history. Probably the highest selling pay-per-view of all time. They will use it. They will milk it. They will build it. They will keep showing it, as they did the bus incident. They couldn't get enough of that. The most disgusting day in UFC history. What happened? Nothing. The only thing that happened was Conor went to court and he's now facing some lawsuits. But as far as the UFC is concerned, I'm seeing people say, Dana White needs to strip Khabib Nurmagomedov. Really? Why? What happened to Conor back in April? Zuba and members, Islam Makhachev need to be cut. Really? Why? What happened to Artem? No one should be cut. No one should be released. No one should be fined by the UFC. The only difference between Saturday night and April in Brooklyn, the only difference is that happened at an event. And why is that notable? It's notable because Conor is not sanctioned by the New York State Athletic Commission right now. The licenses expire every year. So when he did what he did in Brooklyn, New York couldn't do anything to him. That's why he didn't face any sort of repercussions as far as his fighting his career is concerned. That's why he didn't get fined or suspended. On Saturday night, Khabib is a licensed Nevada fighter, and that's why they're holding on to his money, but I expect him to get it. But that's why they probably will fine him, and that's why they probably will suspend him. But when they suspend him and they suspend him for 6 months, he's just not going to fight in those 6 months. So it's really no real punishment. Yeah, the money will be a punishment, but he stands to make in excess of 7 figures for this fight, especially if it does as well on pay-per-view as it's supposed to. So it's going to be no harm, no foul. Why should he be punished for, similar things that happened back in April? Enough with the stripping, enough with the releasing. None of this is going to happen. You saw it yourself. Members of Khabib's team being arrested, being detained. Conor saying, no, he knows what's up. He knows the score. He knows what's happened. Remember last week on the program? Do we have that audio? We have that audio of Conor talking last. This is what Conor said last week before all of this. This is last week before any of this happened. Leading up to the fight, this is him talking about the feud last week on this very show. Listen in.
Every single one of them can get it. And this is never going to be over. This fight, it's not over on this fight. Trust me on that. Every one of them need to watch where they step. Watch what they say. Watch what they do. Watch where they sleep at night. And that's the truth of it.
So there you have it. It will never be over. And what happened on Saturday night only ensures that it will never be over and only ensures that they will do a rematch. Now, will they do a rematch next? I don't know. Maybe that's a little soon. Tony Ferguson deserves a crack at the belt once and for all. He was a good soldier. But after that, of course, just look at the tweets online from Conor. Match is over. War is not over. Battle is won. All that stuff and more. This is not over. I don't care if he lost 3 rounds to 1. By the way, Daniel Cormier lost 4 rounds to 1 and got a rematch. Yeah, I know the belt was changed and all that stuff, but are you kidding me with the amount of money that was made? Come on, guys. Open your eyes. And by the way, I'll watch the rematch. I think Conor could do better in the rematch. I don't know if he wins the fight, but I watch the rematch, and all of you will as well. So this sanctimonious rhetoric, and I just want to say I am guilty of it as well. While I was watching that, and I'm up there, and I'm listening to, I'm watching the whole thing unfold, and I'm standing next to Chael, and I'm standing next to Stephen A. Smith, of all people. It's so surreal. I'm standing there, and Stephen A. is being Stephen A. right next to me, and the rest of our crew is there. I know in the back of my mind, I will admit, I am defensive of the sport. I love the sport. I've grown up watching this sport from beginning to now. I make a living covering this sport. I want the sport to be seen in the best light possible, and I know that the world was watching. I know everyone was watching. This was the most talked about event in sports worldwide on Saturday night. Everyone was watching, and everyone wanted to see how it would play out. And there go the crazy cage fighting animals jumping out of the cage and acting a fool. And I know what the talk is going to be. And so in the moment, I'm a little emotional, I will admit, and I used the word heartbreaking on SportsCenter, and I regret it a little bit. It wasn't heartbreaking. I will say that I was concerned, and I thought it was sad to see Khabib do that because I know that's unlike him, and I thought it was very sad to see Conor get lit up. That's a cowardly move. You don't punch a guy who just fought. You don't do that with bare knuckles. So I was sad in that moment. I was sad for the sport. I was sad for the UFC. There's a lot of eyeballs. But now, less than 48 hours away, removed, and there's no harm, no foul, and no one was arrested, and no one was seriously hurt. It's back to being the fight game. And if you think for a second that this was just a standalone thing, no, it wasn't. This was built up. I kept telling you guys. Religion, Islam, family, Dagestan, Chechnya, this is no joke. There's a reason why no one talks about this stuff. There's a reason why no one goes there. This is personal. Khabib still lives at home with his parents. He has 2 children. He is married. But the youngest child in his culture still lives at home. You see the way he talks about his dad. You see what he said at the post-fight press conference. My dad is going to smash me. His dad said to Russian media today that the punishment that he will give his son for acting that way will be way worse than anything Nevada or the UFC could do to him. He snapped. It's personal. It got under his skin. It clearly did. Conor was in his head. He clearly was. But guess what? Unlike Jose Aldo, unlike Eddie Alvarez, it actually fueled him. It actually made him better. It actually helped him rise to the occasion. That's the difference. That's why he's so good. That's why he's 27-0 now. That's why he is the most dominant force in the history of the sport. That's why he's en route, maybe 1 win away from being the best lightweight of all time. 27-0, are you kidding me? That's insane. But if you think for a second that this won't be used in promotion, if you think for a second that this was, an isolated incident, no, we should have saw this coming. And the UFC saw it coming, and that's why they left a lot of people in the back. They knew it could have been worse, and it could have been worse. Thank God it wasn't. But it wasn't now that I step back, it was unfortunate. It sucked. But maybe Gus Johnson had it right. Maybe Gus Johnson knew all along. Gus Johnson, who was the butt of all our jokes back then in 2010, maybe Gus Johnson had it right. Gus Johnson, sometimes these things happen in MMA. Guess what? They do. And they will continue to happen. And certainly when these two are in the same room fighting each other, they will continue to happen. We just have to be ready for it. We have to be prepared. And we can't think that, the UFC is going to be above all of this. They are going to strip him. They are going to fight. They're not going to. Different strokes for different folks. Now, if it's Islam Makhachev jumping out of the cage, yeah, he might get fined. If it's Paul Daly hitting someone after the bell, yeah, he might get, kicked out. Khabib Nurmagomedov isn't getting released. Conor McGregor isn't getting punished. None of them are. And that's just it. And we just have to come to recognize that. It was a classic tit-for-tat moment. It was the buildup of everything that happened from April up until this point, and that's it. Credit to Rockhold and Cormier for calming down Khabib, and they tried to do their very best, and I think they did a great job of containing it. Wish they showed it a little more. Wish they were honest about it. But as far as the safety, which is more important than anything, respect. Could have been much worse. These two will be back. These two will be fighting each other. This isn't over, as Conor said last week. It's not over by a long shot. We're going to talk more about this. There's so much more to come. We're going to be talking a lot more about 229, about these two. By the way, watch the Artem fight in Moncton, New Brunswick. Those poor fans get canceled after all this. Poor Artem can't catch a break. Can't catch a break. Plenty more to come. We've got a full show. Luke Rockhold coming up. Chael Sonnen in studio. Derek Lewis is going to be joining us. The social media star himself. Matt Hughes is going to talk to us, and I'm looking forward to that. Kevin Lee. We've got Tony Ferguson. Maybe there's some stuff going on. I don't know what's happening. But yes. And Matt Mitrione and is going to be in studio. And Chris Eubank is going to be here. Chris Eubank. Let me tell you something. We need now more than ever Chris Eubank in our lives. I tell you that much.